Just what will we come across this time?
This world is full of unsolved mysteries.
Chess in the game of Genshin Impact has played a background role of creating the overarching story's themes. While it isn't strictly a core inspiration, given that chess in and of itself doesn't have such an exalted history of symbolism, chess is still a game of reason, strategy, and logic. Chess symbolisms in the form of the Gnosis give an air that everything in the Archon quests is simply a game for the higher being, and that all pieces have a part to play and a role to execute. That is the overall role chess has in the game of Genshin, and none of the pieces work the hardest than the pawns themselves. I've covered the symbolism of Venti as a queen on the board in a previous video. However, this video will take a new perspective. This video instead creates and forges a new relationship between the two that rely heavily on thematic symbolism between the chess piece's fundamentals and the character's role in the story. So welcome to the Traveler, the Pawn. As a disclaimer, these are analyses based on literary and fundamental symbolisms of the piece. Much like my Venti video, the symbolisms of the pawn that I will be correlating with the Traveler are observed from prolonged playing of the game chess, but are not established as canonical for the sole reason chess has no canon lore. The Traveler's role in the story of Genshin is still unknown. It's fascinating to see how much symbolism they share with the deceivingly simple piece of the pawn. First is that the pawns are a support unit that help in piece development. Fundamentally, the chances of you winning with a pawn are minuscule compared to piece combinations, but that doesn't mean pawns don't have a place on the board. Pawns are a necessary support unit because they allow or disallow piece movement. You can't move a piece without moving a pawn, and even in the case of horses, you don't ever want a piece to be in the center of the board without proper support because they can be countered. You can't and should never develop a piece without properly addressing your pawns. And much like the pawn, the Traveler also helps in the development of other pieces. The Traveler in and of themselves is a support unit. The Traveler's role in character stories allow other units to move around them. They simply watch, yes, but they act for a catalyst of emotions, rants, vulnerabilities, and other crucial character developments that help other units grow. The Traveler doesn't meddle or interact much, but will be active if they have to be. By extension, they help other people develop. A really great example of this is the role of the Traveler in the Archon quests that involve the other nations. When you look at the stories of Liyue, Mondstadt, and Inazuma, it's not them going through a mind-changing experience directly, but instead tackles how the other pieces interact with the world around them. The role of the Traveler is to engage in the world, and by extension, unintentionally help the Archon of that quest undergo their own character change. Venti and Dvalin's friendship was the highlight of Mondstadt's Archon quest, with the Traveler simply being there to help Venti purify it. The Liyue Archon quest was a long-standing testimony to Liyue's capability of independence outside of Rex Lapis's guidance, and even tests Rex Lapis's own sentiments of finally taking a rest from the Archon position. And the Inazuma Archon quest revolve around the idea of eternity versus stasis. The Traveler, in all of them, is simply a means to an end. The Traveler had always been a support unit and a background entity throughout all the tribulations of the nations. But that doesn't mean it has to stay that way, because we know that the purpose of the journey is to reach the end. So second is that pawns are an endgame piece. There are a million ways to know if a person understands the higher fundamentals of chess as a game. It's all a matter of how they regard a pawn. To a newbie, a pawn is simply something you move before the pieces. These are just blockades on the second rank that you need to move to get to the more important pieces like the queen, the bishop, and the rook. You move the pawn in front of the queen, and the queen asserts dominance over the board. However, a seasoned chess player will tell you that pawns are a late-game investment. Pawn structure is crucial in the later stages of the game because they can block off other pieces, both your own and others. They can support other pieces and they can advance to the last rank for promotion. A pawn's endgame is something not a lot of new players consider because it's a level of careful consideration above a newbie's perspective. A difference in pawn numbers can determine whether you win, draw, or lose in the endgame of chess. Much like the Traveler's story is continuous, but it's an accumulation. The Travelers started the story without access to their powers, but the more that they travel, the more their inherent importance in the overall game of Celestia is being realized. But as we proceed closer to the endgame of Genshin, whether that be in 1 year or 5 years, the Traveler is slowly proceeding to the end of their journey. One great example is the concept of promotion. When a pawn reaches the end of the board, the pawn can become any unit save for the king. The Traveler, on the other hand, is capable of using multiple elements, and we see in the early cutscene that their true final form, sword, and potential has yet to be reached. Promotion, much like in chess, is like how the Traveler can become any element they want. In their own character's story, we have this line of dialogue. The Keeper is fading away. The Creator has not yet come. But the world shall burn no more, for you shall ascend. The Traveler has always been the ace up the story's sleeve, showing a fraction of their celestial power when the situation demands it. We've seen this with Dvalin's cleansing, Liyue's fight with Osial, and the abolishment of the Vision Hunt Decree. The hints of the Traveler's true otherworldly potential are sprinkled in, but at the current state of the game, we have no final confirmation on what they can or can't do. Third is the general meaning of the word pawn, a subordinate, a weaker, inferior entity that serves as a person used for their own ends. Whether we like it or not, the role of the Traveler is basically a puppet, just by how they're being treated by others. Commissions, kill this, save the country. It's all pretty repetitive. Yes, meta-narratively, from the player's perspective, there are eyes into the lore, and there wouldn't be a game if they didn't follow that rhythm. But in the in-universe aspect of the story, they go where fate demands them to go. In the story of Genshin, we are constantly reminded about gods and the role of fate. That destinies are preordained and that your story is already written for you. The Traveler is merely a puppet of several factions to carry out the fate of the world, and even the Traveler somewhat agrees. They make brief mentions in responses to other characters about how the fates of the world are intertwined, and how they, in and of themselves, are part of the weaves of fate. But in the trailer of the Archon story, Lainsleeve's voice line towards the Traveler mentions an interesting concept about reweaving fate.
Step forth if you have understood the meaning of your journey. Defeat me, command me to step aside. Show me that you are worthier than I to rescue her. Then, the threads of all fate will be yours to reweave.
Perhaps the Traveler's role in the future ceases to be a measly pawn, and instead becomes the player they've always been destined to be. Who knows? But yes, that's it for this one. The correlations between the Traveler's role as a pawn is quite minute, given that we don't have much information on the Traveler and the pawn piece in the first place. But I did want to voice my own key correlations between the pawn and the Traveler themselves. But that's it, there really just isn't much information to work on. My name is Aster, and thank you for chilling with me.